How did China pull off one of the most astonishing economic transformations in all of human history? It's an incredible story of lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty in a single generation, going from the brink of collapse to a global superpower. So let's break down exactly how they did it. Just try to picture this. The year is 1978. In China, a staggering 90% of the population is living in what we call extreme poverty. The country is basically reeling from decades of chaos, famine, and turmoil. Now, let's fast forward to today. That 90% figure, it has absolutely plummeted to less than 1%. I mean, it's a turnaround so massive, so fast, that there's really nothing else like it in modern history. So, the big question is, how? How on earth did one of the poorest countries on the planet transform itself into a global superpower in just 4 decades? That's the puzzle we're going to piece together right now. All right, to really get a sense of the scale here, we need to look at China's place in the world economy then and now. Back in 1978, China's economy was, look at this, a tiny sliver of the global pie. It accounted for just 2% of the world's GDP. Honestly, on the world stage, they were barely a blip on the radar. And today, well, that tiny sliver has exploded to over 18% of global GDP, making China the second biggest economy on the planet. That kind of leap is it's staggering. But you can't understand the miracle without understanding the chaos that came right before it. So we've got to rewind a bit, back to the era of Mao Zedong. So, in 1958, Mao kicks off something called the Great Leap Forward. The goal was, it was incredibly ambitious. He wanted to basically skip decades of development and turn China into an industrial giant almost overnight. But the reality? It was an absolute catastrophe. People were literally told to build steel furnaces in their backyards, but the metal they made was totally useless. On the farms, the government took away all private land, so farmers had zero incentive to work hard. And what happens? Grain production just tanks, leading straight into one of the worst famines in all of human history. And if you want one story that just perfectly sums up the flawed thinking of the time, look no further than this sparrow extermination campaign. So, Mao decides sparrows are pests, eating all the grain. The order goes out, kill all the sparrows. But what do sparrows also eat? Bugs. With no sparrows left, the insect population just exploded. Locusts swarmed the fields and ate the crops, making the famine even worse. It's a textbook case of unintended consequences. But, it wasn't all a complete disaster. Amidst all the chaos, some important foundations were actually laid. A national education system got started, and literacy rates did begin to creep up. That would turn out to be incredibly important later on. Okay, so after Mao dies in 1976, a new leader comes to power. His name is Deng Xiaoping, and he is about to steer the ship in a completely different direction. And the change in thinking was just a complete 180. Where Mao was all about rigid, top-down ideology, Deng was all about pragmatism. He just cared about what worked. He had this famous saying, "It doesn't matter if a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice." Basically, results over ideology. So what did he actually do? Well, he started from the bottom up. First, he leased land back to farming families and let them sell any extra they grew for a profit. Boom, incentive. Then he gave factory managers more freedom over what to produce. He encouraged small businesses to pop up in the countryside. And maybe most importantly, he made education a top national priority. And those education reforms, they had a huge payoff. In 1986, his government made 9 years of school mandatory for every single kid. And just look at the result on this chart. The literacy rate shot up from 65% in '82 to over 95% 3 decades later. An educated, skilled workforce was being built from the ground up. Okay, so with things starting to turn around at home, Deng's next big move was to plug China's growing productivity into the global economy. And the way he did this was through these things called Special Economic Zones, or SEZs. You can think of them as these little laboratories for capitalism. They were designated areas with way lower taxes and fewer rules, all designed to lure in foreign companies, foreign money, and foreign technology. And the poster child for this was the city of Shenzhen. In 1980, this place was just a quiet little fishing village. Then it became the very first SEZ, and its economy just exploded. Look at this. The GDP went from basically nothing to over $420 billion in 40 years. It went from a village to a sci-fi metropolis. So yeah, the SEZ experiment was a massive success. This open door policy opened the floodgates for foreign investment. It went from a tiny trickle of about $60 million in 1980 to, get this, over $333 billion in 2021. The world wanted in, and China became the factory for the entire planet. Now, this whole transformation was, without a doubt, an incredible economic success story, but that success came with a steep price, and it's really important we talk about the trade-offs. This comparison with India really puts the speed and scale of China's growth into perspective. If you look back to 1990, the average person in India was actually slightly better off than the average person in China. But fast forward to 2020, and China's GDP per capita is nearly 3 times bigger. That divergence is just mind-blowing. Deng Xiaoping had a famous way of describing his whole strategy. He called it crossing the river by feeling the stones. And what that meant was taking it one step at a time. Gradual, practical reform. You try something, see if it works, and then you adjust. It was the total opposite of Mao's grand, top-down ideological plan. But, and this is a huge but, these new economic freedoms did not come with political freedoms. The brutal crackdown at Tiananmen Square in 1989 was a stark reminder of that. The environment was absolutely devastated in this race for growth. And at the end of the day, the government's authoritarian control didn't loosen, it actually got stronger. So China's model managed to pull 800 million people out of poverty, an achievement that is just unprecedented. But it leaves us with this really tough, uncomfortable question. Could it have been done any other way? Was that iron-fisted authoritarian rule a necessary price to pay for this economic miracle? That, right there, is the complex legacy of China's rise.